So on the 30th of June this year, the government introduced some legislation called the Electric Vehicles Smart Charge Point Regulations 2021. So this legislation governs how all EV charge points going forwards must be smart. And unlike previously when they've talked about smart charge points, this legislation goes into a lot of detail about what the definition of smart is and what minimum requirements they must comply with. So in this video, I'm going to go into detail about what this means for installers and customers. So this is me in the edit, and I've realised that the video is a little bit cumbersome as it is, so I'm going to split it into two parts. So part one is going to cover what the changes are and why they've been implemented, and then part two will cover what the impact of those changes has been to us as installers and you as customers. So this is part two. Roll the credits. So there have already been quite a few videos on this subject, and I don't want to duplicate what these videos are doing. So what I want to do, because we've been doing this for a couple of months now, talk about what some of the biggest impacts have been and what you need to think about if you're installing these charge points, or if you're a customer and you've had a charge point installed recently that complies with the new regulations. But before I do go into any detail, give us a cheeky thumbs up on that like button, subscribe to get notifications of our future videos on electric vehicles, electric vehicle charge points and all related technologies, and check us out on our other social media platforms. So what does this mean for installers and what does this mean for customers?
What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean?
With the charge points being able to connect to an app, as an installer, I think it is all of our duties to make sure that when you leave site, the customer has installed the app on their mobile device or tablet or logged onto the portal on their computer. They've got an established connection between the charge point and the cloud, whether that's via their Wi-Fi connection or a 4G SIM card via a dongle or a built-in SIM card. And they've been given a demonstration of how to use that charge point and change the charging schedules, as well as disable their charger and read off the stats on when their charge points have been used and how much electricity has been used. I think that's a real basic service that not all charge point installers put in place, but I do think that's really important, especially now that the charge points come default set up to charge between a certain window. That might not suit their needs, so we need to make sure that the customers are set up and they understand what they're doing to control their charge point. For you as a customer, obviously, if you're using somebody like ourselves, that will be done. If you're not sure, speak to your installer, ask them if they'll make sure the charge point is connected up before they leave site, and they'll give you a demo on the app. Usually only takes 5 or 10 minutes at the end, but sometimes it can be a little fiddly. And I know I've been contacted by people before where their installer has left site. They can't get in touch with them after they've left site, and they don't know how to set up the apps because sometimes they can be a little bit finicky. And having an installer who's done it multiple times, you build up this knowledge of how that's done and how to do it quickly and make it easy for the customer. So for me, that should always be part of the service. Anyone not willing to make sure you're all set up and give you a demo on the app is probably a bit dodgy. Just on a side note, as an installer, it's also worth maintaining a log of your charge points that you install, serial numbers and such, to make sure you have proof that all the charge points you've installed comply with the new regulations, because there are quite hefty fines for not complying with the new regulations. I'll go into that later. Again, with the random delay that's at the start and end of charging sessions, this is purely a little bit of education that you should do with your customers, just to make sure they understand why, when they plug their vehicle in and it's scheduled to charge right now, why it hasn't started charging. This will just avoid simple questions and phone calls down the line when inevitably their charging was supposed to start at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. They've gone out and checked it at 12:05 and it still hasn't started. So again, just a little bit of education, making sure they understand. And most of these charge points also have a way of overriding this delay. So if they're in a real rush and they want to start it charging immediately, show them how to do it. Most of the time, it's just a quick button or a tap in the app. So, what about cyber security? Well, because this isn't introduced at the moment, keep your eye on the legislation changes and keep your eye on which charge points are compliant with it. And then make sure that when they come into effect, the charge points being installed are compliant. And especially if this is important to you as a customer, you want to be making sure that asking the installer this specific question to make sure that your charge point meets the cybersecurity requirements as and when they're required. Just as a quick funny story from the edit, I was talking to a charge point manufacturer the other day, and he claims that by next year, it'll be harder to break into a customer's charge point than it will into an ATM. Make of that what you will. Now, one thing to bear in mind as an installer is bulk buying charge points just before the cutoff date. What we did see in early June was tons of charge points being sold off at big discount rates that you as an installer would not be allowed to install after the 30th of June. So the distributors are not doing anything wrong by selling them to you just before the cutoff date, but you would be doing something wrong by selling them on to customers after that date. So again, make sure you're not falling into some trap when the cybersecurity requirements come out and you're installing charge points that are non-compliant. So I'm going to go into an FAQ on questions that I've been asked up to now on these changes in legislation. So the first question is, does my existing charge point need to comply with these new regulations? And alternatively, if I'm moving house, does my charge point need to comply with the new regulations when it's moved? And the answer is no, it doesn't need to be. It's only for people selling a new charge point. So, what if you don't comply with the law?
Breaking the law, breaking the law.
Who's going to police it? So the UK government's Office for Product Safety and Standards has been appointed as the enforcing authority of the legislation, and they have the power to enforce fines of up to £10,000 per non-compliant charge point installation and up to £250,000 fines for obstruction of justice. So that could be if you prevent people from looking at non-compliant installations, or if you lie to the enforcement officers. So for me, that's enough to put anybody off installing non-compliant charge points, because the risk of a £10,000 fine would wipe out quite a lot of profit that you could have potentially built up by doing the installations themselves. It's just not worth it. And again, just remember that as an installer, you're the one selling the charge points to the customer if you supply that charge point. Okay, this is one I've been asked many, many, many times. Does these new regulations imply that the grid can steal electricity out of your car? And the answer is no! This is a load of rubbish. So with all standard electric vehicle charge points today, and with most electric vehicles being sold, bar a couple of suppliers such as VW and Nissan, it is not possible to pull electricity from the battery through your charge point socket. I know Hyundais have their vehicle to load capabilities, but that isn't a vehicle to grid capability, and I don't believe the current vehicles are vehicle to grid capable. VW does have vehicle to grid capability coming, and Nissan, through its CHAdeMO port, has had it for a long time. However, through the AC connector, this will not be possible. Incidentally, I did have a customer who claimed his mate down the pub twice had the electricity stolen from his vehicle. I do believe he'd just forgotten he'd taken it for a drive. So hopefully this is useful, gives you a little bit more information. If you do have any more questions, please let me know, put them in the comments or contact us on social media. I'll try and collect them together, and if there's enough questions, I'll do another video, or I'll just try and answer them in the comments below if there's just one or two. So make sure you like and subscribe. Give us a cheeky thumbs up on that like button. Make sure you check out our other social media. We're going to be doing loads more electric vehicle videos. We've got a bunch of battery storage videos and PV videos coming. And in the meantime, thanks very much for watching.